In this session, we're going to dive deeper into the idea of serializing your content, which is really the secret to getting the most out of your best ideas. So as a reminder, people don't learn by hearing something just once. Okay? We don't learn logically, right? We humans, right? We understand first by repetition, and then we actually learn experientially. Okay, so we don't tend to learn things logically or didactically or through concepts alone. Right? Humans understand in our minds first by having things repeated. Then we actually learn it, meaning we get it. We see how it works and we see how it fits into our life. We see cause-effect when we go and we learn it experientially. When we do something in the world and then we get the feedback from the world. Teachers, unfortunately, make the mistake of thinking that they've taught something because they've said it. Okay, so if you go to a college class or you listen to someone giving a talk, what you'll find is usually they will go over a concept too fast. They'll skim over something without going into depth enough, without explaining it in a way that you really can understand it, you can get it in your mind, and then giving you enough tools and techniques and so forth that you walk away and you really have it. You really own it. It's something that you have in your life that you can use. Okay? And so when you remember these pointers, what they do is they direct you to teaching in a much better way. So to actually get your concepts through, you must repeat. You must restate your key ideas in several ways, with several examples, in several contexts, before someone will even try them in most cases. Not only do they need several ways of hearing something, they typically need several techniques as well. Okay, so they need several ways of hearing it. They also need several techniques, several different examples that they can use. So if you're teaching someone about how to become financially independent, how to get out of debt, and how to accumulate assets, for example, you're going to have to explain to them what debt is and how it works. You're going to have to explain money and what it is and how it works. And you're going to have to explain assets and how they work. You're going to have to give lots of examples and metaphors, and you're going to have to give several different techniques. Because again, each of us is different. We don't hear things the same way. We don't learn things the same way. Now, what this leads to, of course, is the realization that you get to keep saying your stuff over and over and over, meaning you get to serialize your content, and that's not a bad thing. Okay, by picking the one or two or three very best ideas that you have and then figuring out lots of ways to say them, you're going to do better than by trying to say a different thing every time you communicate in your product and in your marketing. So the way to start, right, is to start with each key angle of your concept and then present from there. Okay, so again, solving a problem or achieving a result, it involves several key steps. So whether it's losing weight or getting out of debt or finding a relationship or doing better in a hobby, you have to go through several steps. You can ask yourself as the teacher or the product producer, is this part of the process interesting enough to organize a piece of content around? Okay, so this is kind of a first step in serializing your ideas or figuring out how to say something many different ways so that someone can get it. And again, I just want to underscore here the idea that we're not serializing our content so that we can cheat, so that we just can say the same thing over and over and over without having to do any work. Okay, that's not the idea here. The idea is that we want to take our best ideas and we want to figure out lots of different ways to present them, including examples, history, metaphor, stories, different perspectives so that our learner, our student, the person who's purchasing our product, they really, really get it. So, what we're going to do here is we're going to do an example where we're going to take a process that involves several different key steps, and we're going to use each of these key steps or aspects of the process to design a piece of content. Okay, so this is just to get our brain warmed up. So let's take health advice. Okay, and these are different lenses that we could use to look at health advice. Okay, so you could take the calorie lens or calorie perspective and teach how to count calories. You could teach through recipes. You could give specific recipes and food plans. You could drill down and you could talk about specific ingredients. Okay, you could talk about specific foods or ingredients that if you eat some of them, you're going to get healthier, and if you eat some of them, you're going to get less healthy. You could go into one ingredient, for example, fat. Okay, so you could take fat and you could really make that the center of one of your concepts. You could also take another lens called cravings, which is in a way totally different from these others because these others are a little bit more objective. Cravings is subjective. Okay, now we could keep going on and coming up with different perspectives or lenses to look at health advice through. We could look at the psychology of health. We could look at how food affects your moods. We could take the perspective of the people in your life about how people are going to treat you differently if you get healthy than if you're unhealthy. Okay, we could keep going on and on with this. But the point is that what I'm doing is I'm starting with, as I mentioned, there's key steps that you have to go through if you want to solve your problem or achieve your result, right? In the case of health, right, you have to monitor your calories. Of course, you're going to be paying attention to recipes and ingredients. You're going to be monitoring your fat. You're going to have to learn how to deal with cravings. These are just part of the deal. Well, by choosing all of these, more specifically, by brainstorming this list of all the different aspects from all the different perspectives, and then attacking it from each of these different ways, it really helps get the message across, right? It really helps get the message through to the person who's learning. Some people can relate better to a caloric kind of a paradigm, where you just break everything down to a common denominator. There's a number, and they eat a certain amount of calories. Now, of course, we know there's more to it than that, but that piece might really break through to someone, and they go, oh, the reason why I weigh 50 pounds more than I should is because I'm eating 4,000 calories a day. Oh, got it. That makes sense to me. Right? That person may have tried recipes, and they may have tried avoiding fat. They may have tried dealing with their cravings, but that was the thing that got it through. Another person might say, yeah, I get the counting calories thing, but I just don't know how to make food that's healthy. I just need some recipes. Another person might really be focused on the ingredients. If you can just give them all the ingredients that are the healthy ingredients, they'll figure out how to eat them. They'll put them together. They don't need to be concerned with calories or recipes because, they know if you eat these foods, you can eat as much of them as you want, and you're going to be healthy. Okay? Same thing with fat. Some people, they just didn't know that fat lived in certain foods, and maybe you've got to teach them about the foods. So, again, this kind of step one is looking at it from all the different angles and kind of attacking the communication, attacking the teaching from all the different ways that you possibly can. And when you do this, what it does is it allows the human mind to sort of triangulate what you're trying to say. Okay? In other words, they can see it from a few different places, and then they go, oh, now I get what you're talking about. Now I see how this works. Because each of us is wired differently, has different experiences, we have different models, we have different ways of thinking. One of them is going to touch where the other ones don't. Now, let's go down a little bit further and talk about how we might actually serialize one aspect of health. Okay, so here's some health advice repetition examples. And for these examples of how I might serialize, I've chosen sugars or simple carbohydrates as the model. And what I've done is I've come up with 5 different ways of talking about the same thing. Now, these are 5 ways that I might use in 5 different videos that I would create. I might have a series of 5 email newsletters that I send out, or 5 podcasts that I follow up with, or I might have a chapter in my book about sugar and health, and I might have 5 different sections in that chapter. The point that I'm making here is everything that I'm about to say is minimizing the amount of sugar that you eat. That's the point of it. Everything that I'm going to say is a different way of getting the human to say, eat less sugar. Okay? So the first way that I might do it is I might say, limit sugars to X grams per day. In fact, Jorge Cruz, who wrote the bestseller The Belly Fat Cure, he recommends 15 grams of sugars per day. As a general rule, if you just stick to 15 grams total of sugars per day or less, you're going to lose a lot of belly fat and you're going to get a lot healthier. What this forces you to do, of course, is to start reading the ingredients on packages and seeing how much of the carbohydrate inside of a food is sugars. And in the nutritional listings, it breaks it down. And what you start realizing is, oh wow, those blueberries that I was putting in my morning shake, there's 25 grams of sugars just in those blueberries alone. And oh wow, there's a lot of sugar going into my body right there. Okay. By the way, I am not giving you health advice right now. This is an example for content and for marketing. I happen to buy into this way of thinking. It's worked for me, but check with your doctor before you do any diet. Okay. So again, this is just an example. But the point is that when you take sugars and you raise that up in your consciousness and you start reading the packages, you go, oh wow, I'm eating a lot of sugars that I wasn't aware of. Another angle, eliminate processed white flour, rice, and sugar. Just eliminate those things and eliminate any foods that are made with them. If you do that, well, you dramatically reduce the amount of sugar that you take in, right? Just doing that one thing. Now, notice that these 2 things, they're the same, but they're different. In other words, they both lead to eating less refined sugar, but they're 2 different paradigms. One is to actually read packages and read the amount of sugar in them. The other is to just stop eating foods that have white flour, white rice, and white sugar. And then you eliminate the sugar that goes with those things. Another paradigm might be don't drink carbs. Okay, so for example, right now, one of the main kind of root causes they're finding of people being overweight is that we're drinking our carbs in the form of processed juices, fruit juices, sodas, and other drinks that are artificially sweetened or quote-unquote naturally sweetened. And when you drink it, it just goes right down really fast. And if you make it a rule of thumb to not drink your carbs, okay, you're going to dramatically reduce the amount of sugar. Another paradigm might be eat only complex carbs. So now we're shifting away from what to not eat, and we're shifting to what to eat. Okay, so if we switch to only eating the complex carbohydrates and we get away from sugars, right, that serves the same function. Or we could say things like, eat only unprocessed food and minimize fruit. Okay, that might be another way of coming at it. Now here's a completely other paradigm, another total perspective, is to have your students notice how they feel 30 to 60 minutes after they eat sugar. Most of us don't tune in to how we feel, our energy level, our mental processing, 30 to 60 minutes after every meal to notice how that meal affected our energy and our productivity. I remember reading several years ago in one of Moshe Feldenkrai's books, he said, after you eat a meal, you're worthless for a few hours. Okay? Mentally, you just kind of go into this dumb zone in most cases. And you can really change that by making food choices and choosing what you eat. I've noticed that to be really, really very powerful. So you give someone the feedback loop Notice when you eat something that's high in sugar. Notice how you feel 30 to 60 minutes after. All you have to do is notice that a few times, and then the human goes, oh, wow, look at this. I'm dramatically reducing my ability to produce because I have lower energy. My brain is foggy. And then they go and they make the adjustment on their own. Now, this is 5 different ways of saying, stop eating sugar. And they're totally different from the perspective of a customer because they're not an expert on the topic. They don't know all this stuff. They didn't get these distinctions before. But what it allows you to do is to say the same thing, in this case 5 times over, in totally different ways that help the customer triangulate. They get it. Wow, it really makes sense. I mean, you could make a series of 5 videos that, let's say, you used for follow-ups after someone signed up for your interest list. And each of these would be fascinating. Okay? Each of them would be totally fascinating. And as a customer, if you watched a 10-minute video on this, you'd say, wow, that's really great. Thanks for teaching me about the limiting of the sugars. Wow, thanks for teaching me about how, we're drinking carbs and they're making us fat. And, thanks for teaching me about it. Limiting the 3 whites, the flour, the rice, and the sugar, right? I didn't really get that, but I eat a lot of those, and so forth. Thanks for telling me to notice how I feel afterwards. Thanks for telling me the list of the complex carbs to eat. Each of them is valuable in its own right, but it results in the same outcome. Okay, leads to the same thing. As teachers, what we want to do is we just want to say, eat less sugar. Okay, eat less sugar, and you're going to lose weight, and then it's over. But that's not where the high perceived value is, right? The high perceived value is in the insights, in the techniques, in the action steps, in those things that really give us a lot of leverage. Okay, so where do we start? Well, we start with our best concept. And this is where we always want to start when we're teaching information. Right? So start with your best concept or technique. And a hint here, it's the one that customers have the most emotional energy around. It's the one that triggers them, and it's the one that causes them to proactively seek a solution, something you figured out in your niche identification. Next, identify each aspect of the problem and solution that's interesting in an emotionally compelling way, and then create content from that angle. And then repeat with as many angles as possible. Okay, so like we did here, we narrowed in on health advice. We looked at several angles. We chose one, and we looked at it from several different perspectives, and then we talked about them. Now, I first learned about this kind of way of thinking when I was teaching dating advice for men, and I started writing newsletters, and I realized that there were a handful of techniques and concepts and ideas that men really responded to. Things like overcoming their fear of rejection, starting a conversation with a woman, meeting a woman online, getting a date, what to talk about on a date, how to build attraction, that kind of stuff. And I realized that the guys that were on my list and that were interested, they couldn't hear enough about those things. They couldn't hear it from enough perspectives. They couldn't get enough examples. They couldn't see enough questions from readers that were submitted. They couldn't see enough of them answered because each new perspective, each new distinction helps build out the puzzle, helps build out the human understanding. Okay, so start with your best concept. Use your very best one, the one that's motivating them in the first place. Then if you want to add more, that's fine too. But you probably won't need more than 3 or 4 or 5 or maybe 6 or 7 at the outside. And then serialize around them. Keep coming up with new ways of saying the same thing, new angles on the same thing to keep it interesting. To you, it will sound like you're teaching the same stuff. To them, it will be really, really powerful. It'll be like an epiphany because they'll say, oh, now I get it. It's also, of course, very economical because you don't have to just keep coming up with new topics. It's also important as you serialize your content to motivate your students to action. All right, we learned about why, what, how, and what if. We've learned about some kind of primary motivators here. At the beginning, we want to tell them why they're going to learn what they're going to learn. Well, as you're teaching from each of these new perspectives, as you're serializing your content, always link every action step back to a primary motivator and keep linking them over and over and over and over and over. Also tell stories of others who took the action and got the results, and teach them about speed of implementation. So for example, I gave you 5 examples of how you could serialize the idea of eat less sugar, right? Well, in this case, if I was going to link them back to the primary motivator, let's say that the primary motivator was to lose belly fat. Okay, so in the first video, I would talk about limiting the amount of sugars that you eat every day to a particular number of grams. And then, of course, I would say, because you want to lose that belly fat, and this is how to do it fast. If the next week I'm teaching about eliminating processed white flour, rice, and sugar, right, I'm going to be talking about how these are what make belly fat, and if when you stop eating these, the body burns the belly fat and it goes away. Same thing with drinking your carbs, right? I might hold up a soft drink and say, see, look at this soft drink. This soft drink is 25% sugar or whatever it is. And then I might take that sugar and I might kind of hold it next to my waist and say, that goes right to your gut. It becomes fat right here. So don't drink this because it's going to make you fat. And when you stop drinking your sugars, then you start losing weight. In other words, keep linking it back up to the primary motivator over and over and over. If someone wants to lose fat around their belly, you can't say, lose belly fat, lose fat around your belly, stop gaining fat around your belly. You can't say those things enough. You can't over-communicate them. And, of course, because of the Y learning style, you always want to be linking everything that you're teaching back up to the final result. Keep connecting it, keep aligning it, keep using that to keep them motivated. Next, tell stories of others who took action, got the results. Okay, that kind of speaks for itself, but as your students have positive stories, use them and tell other people about them. Now, of course, in marketing, you have to be careful because you can't make any claims that are not typical. But inside of your product, you can give case studies. If you've got, if you're within the guidelines, and of course, check with your legal professional on this one if you want to use it in your marketing, and you're confident this represents actual results that are typical, you can use it. But tell stories of others who took the action and got the results. Very important. And you've heard me teach on speed of implementation, of course, which is winners, successful people, when they get an idea, they put it into action right now. So you can keep bringing that one up. You can keep talking about it, and that'll get people motivated as well. And then ultimately, serialize your products. Okay, you can really take this to a far extent. Create a product that shares all the basic elements and techniques of success. Then drill down by creating individual products that go deep on each of the most important aspects on your area of teaching. For example here, when I go back and I review my dating advice book, Double Your Dating, and I read through it, I kind of smile and I always think, wow, it's all in there. Like all of my best ideas that I created for success in the dating world, they're all there. Now, I went on and released many, many products, okay, several of them, 10, 20 hours long, teaching all different aspects of dating advice. But the basics were in my first ebook, okay, that you can buy for $20 or so. How is it that I grew such a big business and sold so many of these other products that kind of taught the same thing? Well, it's because inside of the ebook, I may have devoted 5 pages to a particular topic, but someone who's really interested in that topic, like let's say online dating, right? They want to get the kind of the mastery of it, so they'll go buy a product that's 12 or 15 hours long of audio and video, right? And what I've done is I've serialized my products. I've actually created product that takes what was in another one and just expands it and goes even deeper. 2 of my favorite authors are Al Ries and Jack Trout. They wrote the famous marketing book Positioning, which I just think should be required reading for all humans. Positioning by Al Ries and Jack Trout. And they wrote that book in 1980, I believe. And then they wrote a whole series of books after that. Okay, the 22 immutable laws of marketing, marketing warfare. They kind of split off and they wrote books separately, The New Positioning and Focus and The Origin of Brands, and on and on and on. And what I think is kind of fun is that they're pretty much all the same book. Okay, they're 80% the same core idea that they shared in positioning. It's just taught from a different perspective, from a different angle with different metaphors. And I, of course, have read all their books because they're all great. And the more I read it and get it from different perspectives, the more I go, oh, I get it. Oh, got it. Oh, and they add a few new distinctions here and there. But they're probably the best I've ever seen at really serializing their products and creating an awesome kind of franchise almost based on one really good core idea, which is positioning and what you do to the mind, not what you do to your product. So ultimately, serialize your products, and if you can, even create several products about the same topic just from different angles, because people will buy more of the thing that they really like, right, rather than a bunch of stuff about things that they're not that interested in. So for your customers' sake, really get clear about what it is that they want, what their frustrations are, what their needs are, and then figure out how to talk about the techniques that solve those things and the ideas that give them the results that they want from many perspectives. Okay, and keep doing it over and over and over. Keep tying it back to the result that they want so that they're motivated to learn, and keep getting them into action, and then ultimately serialize your products, because that's what will help you win the game in the long run.